Okay, friends, here we are, day 2. Now on the other side of Lake Superior. We're on the eastern shore, almost to the south shore. So 360 miles across the vastness of the lake. It's 160 north and south. That was something in our first video that I got a little bit tripped up on, just to be factually correct. Anyway, there's a couple of other things that I wanted to make clear, because after I looked at that video, I was in a little bit of a hurry when we were trying to record it. And one of the things is about the Grand Portage itself, which has to do with a rendezvous spot where, I think I did explain this. For those who don't know, it's pretty evident perhaps, those who do, but the trapping happened out in the vast woodlands, and the smaller canoes and smaller parties brought those furs to the rendezvous spot on the shore of Lake Superior. And the Montreal canoes, those that paddled all of the 5 Great Lakes, came across and met them in the summertime at that place. And the way the historians would typically talk about it was that that was one of the nexus points of this vast global trade that was occurring even way back then, 350 years ago, 300 years ago. And so that trade network is what we've emphasized. But what I was trying to emphasize is, what about the ways that the cultures came together between the people? And what if we were to reorient how we're teaching history in terms of what human beings have learned from each other, rather than just the commerce, the material things? The emphasis on, I kind of wonder, did these adventurers go all this distance, thousands of miles into this vast wilderness, just because they thought they could make their fortune? Probably their human curiosity and the interactions with such interesting people with such different points of view. And that's a principle that we want to bring forward more now, or I say we. I believe, and hopefully you agree, that the idea that it's all about trade and commerce or money is not really the thing that is advancing our consciousness and our awareness. So one of the contrasts that I additionally wanted to make is that that's one way the historians talked about it. I wanted to talk about it, or emphasize the idea of the interactions of cultures and how people lived differently, and some of the philosophies as how they came to understand the beauty and the wonder of the life where they lived on this planet, and what that taught them, what that did for their spirits, for their hearts, and how that was shared. That's a contrast. And the other part to the prayer that we're carrying in this Tracing the Path is the whole idea that part of the evolution of consciousness. Now I'm going to broaden this out for a moment, just away from the notion of where we are in the land. But the idea that we as human beings, we are always, and it's universal, we contrast ourselves from the others, and see how we're different. But when we make that the basis of defining who we are and how we're going to interact, if we make that the basis exclusively, that's where we get into conflict, We create wars. We insist that your one belief system doesn't consistent with another's, etc. And so one of the kind of subtly simple ideas that helps us to advance consciousness, but kind of hard in practice, is the idea of moving out of a duality consciousness or a duality way of speaking about things, because our words and our language formulate really how we think and how we interact. And that shows up in so many different ways. You know, these are living beings here, these trees, the rocks, the lake. To many of us, that living spirit in there is they are not things, but our relatives. So that's one way of speaking. And this idea of an us and a them, or a contrast between one way versus another way, limits us and can lead to a conflicting thing. To some degree, it's useful to have those contrasts, but it's limiting as well. So I don't want to look back and go, that was all bad and we have to do it a different way. But rather, that is, and that was one way. Now, how can we evolve and advance to a broader, more complete, more fulfilling, more loving way that also includes the notion that nature and the land are our relatives, and all two-leggeds, all human beings, we are all one, and we are one with the planet, earth, and sky as well, the cosmos, the whole cosmos. So that was a very important part. That's expanding a little bit of what I was talking about last night, but just kind of one other little factoid, though, was that as I was skipping along, going up and over the height of land is 1,000 feet above the lake, but the Grand Portage itself was 9 miles or 14.5 kilometers. So that was one little difference that I noticed didn't come through clearly. Again, those of you, I don't know how many people are actually going to watch these, but you probably know some of those facts. But you come to this rugged land and appreciate what our ancestors did. Regardless of who your ancestors are, the fact that they could carry out such physically taxing feats is just amazing. So anyway, another principle that is really important in terms of why did we go all the way up here and around Lake Superior, and specifically the focus being Manitou-Gishigans. And that has to do with the ages of human history, of human interaction, of human evolution. Because we, from this kind of Western culture extraction, trace roots back to, well, we can go way back, but especially since Greco-Roman times, the Greeks and the Romans, etc., 2,500 years ago. Obviously, civilizations even longer than that, but 2,500 years. Well, that's how long Manitou-Gishigans has been alive. She has renewed herself 7 times. The lake would break it off, but 7 times that she has renewed herself and grown back. And now, that tree, that rather small but ancient tree, we don't even know how old, but is probably right around 500 years old. So for as long as Europeans have been interacting on this continent with the indigenous peoples and these landscapes, that tree in its current form has been alive. And for as long as things have evolved in the other parts of the world, that tree has been alive, 2,500 years. So she has wisdom. as a living being, her spirit has seen and experienced the vast river of time in that particular place. So by going there and honoring that sacred tree, it's about recognizing that transmission of time and the importance, because of what the tree meant to the people, what the tree meant to the indigenous peoples of these lands and the voyageurs, because they understood. Because they lived amongst them, they lived close to the land and the activities they were engaged with, but they knew that to honor that tree was honoring the forces of nature and supporting all of the ways that they were being and interacting. I'll maybe think of a better way of putting that. It's hard to convey some of these things that I just live. I've lived for a long time, and I hope and suspect many of you have too. Living close to the land, living close to the life of the planet, with the notion that we're not separate, but one, and we can communicate with the relatives, the standing ones, and the stone nations, and the raven that keeps following us along. The ravens keep blessing us. And that kind of brings me to the final point here, because these ceremonies, we're trying to intend to bring forward many of the things that we believe are important. There were many good things that have happened in these last several hundred years, many terrible things as well. But the ways that the cultures have interacted, some of these we know very well. And one of the things I was trying to emphasize last night was what we need to bring forward now more strongly is that cultural principle and way of life that the indigenous people, that was intrinsic to who they are. And those of us who walk in this way, and that is the whole notion of the relation and the spirit, the great mystery that flows through all here on this planet, earth and sky, the Mother Earth, Father Sky. All of it matters, and we are related to it. We are one with it, and we are one with each other as human beings. And the importance of us visiting that, doing the ceremony, was not for us to put an intention or our blessing, but rather this wise spirit being, this incredible lake, this vast inland sea, where 10% of the world's fresh water is in that one body of water, is that we were the ones who received the blessing to carry on our spirit walk. That idea of the connection and the oneness, we received that by the simple act of going there and honoring it and doing the ceremony in our humble, sincere way. What we left behind was gratitude and love, but what we were given, and that's what we will carry from ceremony to ceremony. That in this renewal that we believe is coming, that the eclipse is just a marker for, maybe more than just a marker, but the eclipse is something that is important. That's what we're carrying on our journey. And so Wopidak to Mani Dugishigans, Miigwech to Mani Dugishigans, to use the Anishinaabe language. I don't know the languages very well. I kind of spout off a little bit of Dakota because it feels good in my heart and in my voice, and a little bit of the Ojibwe. But Miigwech to Mani Dugishigans and to Gitchigumi and all of these lands. And we carry that spirit of that energy to all of these ceremonies that we are going to do. Aho, Mitaku Yawasa.